Alex, welcome to the show. Alex?
Optimal minimal.
At this altitude, I can run flat out for a half mile before my hands start shaking.
Can I answer your personal question?
Now would seem an appropriate time.
What if I did the opposite?
I'm a cybernetic organism, living tissue over a metal endoskeleton.
This episode is brought to you by AG1, the daily foundational nutritional supplement that supports whole body health. I do get asked a lot what I would take if I could only take one supplement. And the true answer is invariably AG1. It simply covers a ton of bases. I usually drink it in the mornings and frequently take their travel packs with me on the road. So what is AG1? AG1 is a science-driven formulation of vitamins, probiotics, and whole food sourced nutrients. In a single scoop, AG1 gives you support for the brain, gut, and immune system. So take ownership of your health and try AG1 today. You will get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D and 5 free AG1 travel packs with your first subscription purchase. So learn more, check it out. Go to drinkag1.com/Tim. That's drinkag1, the number 1, drinkag1.com/Tim. Last time, drinkag1.com/Tim. Check it out. This is Tim Ferriss, and welcome to another episode of The Tim Ferriss Show, where I deconstruct world-class performers of all sorts of types, ranging from billionaire investors to chess prodigies to actors to writers to athletes and everything in between. In this episode, we have a real treat, and it's a 2-part episode with Alex Blumberg, who is very well known as a producer for This American Life, co-host of Planet Money, and also the co-founder of Gimlet Media, which has currently 2 Blockbuster podcasts, Startup and Reply All. And in the first part, which you're currently listening to, we are going to talk to Alex about all sorts of aspects of the business of storytelling, the art of storytelling, including gear that he uses, etc. The second part is going to be an excerpt from a class that he taught on creativelive.com. Normally costs about $100, and I advise that company, so I was able to pull out about a half hour of his teaching a class about the art of the interview, crafting the perfect question, etc. That is part 2. I implore you to listen to both. I really enjoyed this. And without further ado, please enjoy Alex Blumberg. Alex, welcome to the show.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
And I have to start off because we have been scheduling, and I know you're racing to get a show out the door. Does it ever get any easier?
I hope so. I really hope so. It has been, yeah, I mean, it's just been, I mean, it's sort of an insane project what I'm doing, which is trying to create a regularly occurring documentary podcast about a company that's starting up while at the same time trying to start that company. So it's been sort of like, cause both of them are sort of full-time jobs. So yeah.
And how do you balance, because I've listened to every episode of Startup and have followed it very closely for a whole host of reasons. How do you balance the real-time documentary nature of the show with planning, say, an editorial calendar and actually having things locked and loaded and ready to go in advance?
I don't balance it. That's the problem. Like that we don't have things locked and loaded and ready to go in advance. Like we were editing we just finished editing this week's episode this morning, and then we just tracked it. That's why I was a little late with you. I was tracking it in the studio today, and then it'll go up tonight. So that's how close to the wire we are. I mean, things are, and you'll hear this episode is all about burnout, and it's all about how.
I was wondering when that episode would come.
Yeah. Because there's a period where I think there's a period in a company's life where people are like, well, this is just the startup. This is the startup experience. And then there's a point at which maybe like probably right about around where we are 4 or 5 months into it, where you're like, it's a startup, but it shouldn't be this hard. And so we sort of realizing like we have to change some things. We have to add some more support. And part of it is just like, you just don't know, like I didn't know. I mean, you know, you don't know what's possible. And so we started out, I think we just didn't have enough capacity to do what we were trying to do.
And what does your current team look like? Well, first question is, what is tracking? I'm still a novice at this, and I have a ton of questions, but what is tracking exactly?
So tracking. So when you're doing sort of a documentary style podcast, which is sort of the kinds that we do, where we have a script. And so what I'll do is I'll go out and I'll gather tape in the field and I'll record different conversations with people, and then I will edit those down. And so I have a bunch of sort of like basically selects tape that I've gathered and I've edited down and cut. So it's like, you know, I'll have like maybe like, you know, 25 minutes of edited tape. And then what I have to do is stitch that together with a script. And so I'll write the script and then we'll do edits on that script. And so I'll read it aloud in the office. We'll all sit around a table, sort of like a table read, I guess. I'll sit around, I'll read my script and I'll play the tape that I've cut from the computer where it's supposed to go in the story. And then people will give us notes on the script and sort of say, this part was dragging and this part should come earlier and this part you can just totally get rid of. It's boring, whatever. And then you rewrite and rewrite and rewrite. And then finally you get to the final script and then you go into the studio and track it. And that's when you actually just lay down your voice tracks. And then those all get mixed together into the final product.
Got it. And the actual reviewing of the tape. So you capture a lot of interview, obviously. And in one of the episodes of Startup, you had one of your employees reviewing those tapes. Do you personally review those tapes, or do you have someone do a first pass and attempt to pull out the interesting stuff?
It goes both ways. I mean, usually I've been the one getting the tape. So I have heard it because I was there, you know, right. You know, with the microphone and the recorder. But usually it's my producer who actually does a first pass through and pulls all the selects.
Got it. Mm-hmm. And what are the criteria for pulling the selects? What makes something worth being in the show?
I think what you're asking, Tim, is what makes good tape, which is
that's right. That's exactly what I'm asking.
That's the question that has consumed my life for the past 20 years. So I have an answer for you. So I think when, you know, one of the things that there's a couple things that you're looking for when you're going through the tape. So because I have a script, because I'm narrating it, I can sort of say pretty much all the basic information, usually better than anybody that I'm talking to. So what I'm going for are specific moments when I'm talking to people. I'm going for specific moments that have some kind of deep emotional resonance, or where something very live and unexpected has happened, or where there is just very authentic emotion has been expressed. And those are the moments that I go for. It's almost sort of like if I'm talking to somebody about whatever, I don't know, just to borrow an example from my Planet Money days, bond prices. What I don't want is somebody talking about bond prices. I want somebody expressing some sort of emotion about it, if that's possible. You know, because I can do all the nuts and bolts, you know, sort of information transfer. And so what you're looking for in your interview subjects is something that you can't provide yourself, some unique perspective. The other thing that you're going for, so that's one whole category of good tape, is sort of like emotionally resonant, you know, emotionally authentic, or something where something interesting or unexpected has happened sort of in the moment. The other category is somebody just telling you a really good yarn, like a really good narrative. And so that's the other thing that we look for, is sort of like, sort of at This American Life, we had a term for this. We just call it an anecdote, but what we really meant was a little story. And so like just for an example, if I start to talk to you, and I say, you know, Tim, this morning I was leaving my house. I was walked out the door and I looked up in the sky and I saw something that I couldn't believe. Like, you want to hear what I said next, right?
Right. That's a very unfulfilling story as it is.
So that's the story. Like, we are hardwired to be like, one sequence of action, another sequence of action, and it's going to build towards something. We want to hear what it's building toward. And if I say to you, I saw something I couldn't believe, a cloud, you'd be like, that's a boring ass story. But if I said, you know, a UFO, then you're like, oh, that's an interesting story. But the mechanics of it, the fact that it's a story and it has a beginning and it has like a narrative progression and sort of, you know, sort of rising action, human beings, I think, are sort of hardwired to want to pay attention to that. That's what we've been telling each other for 40,000 years, and so so those are the other things you're going for, is like people telling you stories.
And the process, I'm so fascinated because I'm struggling with this myself. The process of putting together an episode, especially when you currently have the real time aspect of it, which seems to complicate matters tremendously. How many people do you currently have working on each episode of, let's just say, Startup, and what are their roles?
Yeah, I mean, so that's the thing about this stuff, is that it's so much more time consuming than the other sort of main kind of podcast which is out there, which is a straight interview podcast like what we're doing, which are also like all these elements can be possible in those kind of podcasts as well. And so what we're doing is sort of like I go back and forth, like, is this insane to be spending all this time producing 20 minutes of one kind of podcast when another kind of podcast you could produce in 20 minutes? You know what I mean? And so what we have is so right now on Startup, it's just me and my producer, Caitlin, and then another employee, Lisa, who's going to be producing the second season of Startup. That's not quite enough. Startup comes out every 2 weeks, so we can barely, and because I've been doing this for so long and I've internalized so much of this stuff, like I'm probably more productive at it than somebody else, but so we're not quite getting by with that, but we would definitely need, we need another body or two for sure.
And aside from the producer, you also have an engineer who does post cleanup and that type of thing?
Yeah, sorry. So we have, so on staff it's me and Caitlin, our producer, and Lisa. And then we also have other people on staff who can help with the edit, which is a really, really important part of it. So there's other people. So then we'll usually have one or two other people sitting in to do the edit. So where I sit around and do the table read, they'll give me notes and sort of say this part was slow, this part wasn't. So that's a really important thing. And then we also outsource our transcripts. So we have people logging all that tape so that it's easier to go through. So we have people providing transcripts of the tape. And then we have an engineer who mixes the episode, which is, basically everything from doing all sorts of things that I don't understand, like putting compression on it and making it sound really good, but also just sort of like putting it all together, making it sound good, making the levels right, all that stuff.
Got it. And the one thing that struck me about Reply All, the other show that I've been listening to from Gimlet Media, was listening to the launch of that and how the hosts decided to join forces with you. And one of the things they mentioned was wanting you as an editor, or having you run to and from the two shows, working with them as an editor. Does that primarily mean that you're working on the script and reviewing the transcripts, or what are you doing as an editor?
Yeah, I mean, I think what I think of myself as, and I think one of the reasons that I started this company, I think my primary skill, probably if I had to say, here's the thing that I am best at, it is at being an editor. And being an editor means, that you, and the way I think about it, it's sort of like from the beginning, it's basically being a collaborator with the hosts, with the talent, to getting, the best show that you can get. And so I try to, what that means is that when we have a weekly story meeting for Reply All, where we'll sit around for, we'll talk for 2 hours, we'll talk for an hour about, what are the stories that they want to pursue. And we'll think about interesting angles to go at that story with. We'll decide if it's worth it or not. And then we'll sort of plan, okay, who do we want to talk to? Who would be some interesting people to talk to in the story? What questions do we want to ask them? The questions are really important. If you go out and you don't ask the right questions, you can come back with nothing. You can come back with no good tape. And so you have to sort of design your questions so that you're sort of giving yourself a higher chance than average of getting good tape. And then, so we do all that. And then when they come back and they write the script, then I'll go through the script with them. And usually we do at least one pass, but sometimes 2 and maybe even 3 passes, depending on how tricky a story is. Where we'll really dive in deep and sort of get into the language and sort of say this, you're saying this, but it's not quite right. And so I think when people see it for the first time from the outside, it's like they can't believe how much actual work goes into the making of this stuff. And I'm not sure, and like one of the big questions is sort of like how much of that work is actually necessary work and how much of that work is like, are we spinning our wheels? But my contention has been that like to really like, if you look at the very top of the charts in iTunes, like a lot of those shows have that amount of labor embedded in the programs that they're putting out. Like I come from This American Life, which is where I learned all this stuff. And like, there's even more sort of editing and production work that goes into making those shows. And I know certainly Serial, they were working on that for a year at least. So I think it's related, but I'm not sure.
Oh, it's massive. I mean, I was blown away and not terribly surprised when I heard that Serial had a team working on it for a year prior to the launch. Didn't surprise me at all. I mean, as someone who's a very plodding writer himself, it didn't really surprise me. How did you decide? Well, actually, before I jump away from the editing, what do you do as an editor differently from other people?
I think
because you're clearly very good at it. I mean, the output of the shows reflects that. So the question is, maybe why aren't other people better editors, or what do you do differently?
I think there's a bunch of things. Like, I think This American Life was a real editing shop. And I think it's a pretty special place. Like in that Ira is he's a really great editor, but he's also very encouraging to people to sort of do their own thing. Like it's his show, but he really encourages you to do your own thing within that show. So when I worked there, every story that I thought that I wanted to do that I could sort of make a good case for, I was able to do, and I was able to write it myself. So I think part of being a good editor is wanting to encourage others to sort of like, is having that feeling that like, if we're working on this together, my ego feels like I got some of the credit because I was in there from the beginning, but you're also happy to share the credit with the person who's doing the story. So I think part of it goes back to that sort of, how do I think of myself as an editor? And at This American Life, it was like sort of an elevated job. And then I think partly it's sort of like, when I got to NPR, I realized that like the conception of the job was, your reporter goes out, they come back, and then they play you a story, and you're basically, it's not to time, it's to time. You make a couple suggestions. I didn't understand this part, I didn't understand that part. But you're not like thinking big about like, well, what's the idea that we're trying to go towards with this story? What's the new thing we're trying to say? And so I think partly also what makes a good editor is getting in there from the beginning and talking with the reporters about what are we trying to say? What's the interesting thing? What's the new thing that we're going for here? If we're doing a story that's been done a lot, like, I don't know, politics or homelessness or whatever it is, like something that you've heard about in the news a lot, race, like how are we going to talk about it in a different way, in a new way, in a surprising way? And a lot of like, a lot of the work that makes a story good goes in at the very beginning. And I think that's a lot of editors don't think about their jobs that way. And I think that's why it's, and so I think that helps me, if I'm in there from the beginning and sort of talking about it, it's easier. One other thing that I think about editing, and just quickly, is that like one of the biggest jobs of the editor is just paying attention to your own boredom. I think people who get into journalism get in because like I'm interested in the world and I have a natural curiosity and I want to satisfy that curiosity. But you've got to keep your audience interested, and the editor can help do that. Like the editor, if you have to be curious about the world, but you also have to know, like you have to have this sense, and you're listening to your boredom. It's something that I had to learn to do, but once I did, it's really helpful.
What are the symptoms of boredom? So I know that might sound funny, but what are the symptoms of boredom that maybe you didn't listen to in the early days as much?
Well, I think you try to sort of like if somebody reads something that is like it's somebody that you work together, they're sitting across the table from you, and they read something that is like maybe like sort of a boring sentence, or they've come through a boring thing, or somebody's talking on tape and you don't quite know what they're saying or what the point is. Because you like the person and because, you're a human being with decent human emotions, you'll be trying to think to like, oh, well, probably what the person was saying was this. And so therefore, though that all makes sense because you make up for the reporter who's doing the read. And that's good. Like that's decent human behavior to try to like sort of meet somebody halfway and be understanding and empathetic to what they're saying. But there's something that happens on the radio or in audio when you're listening, the listener doesn't do that. And so you have to train yourself out of that instinct to sort of fill in the gaps with what people are saying. So one sign is just this sort of glimmer of like, wait, I'm confused here. And it's it's often at the back of your head. You don't quite get it, but you just have to pay attention to it because you sort of get what's going on, but there's some question in your mind is like, is that the thing that's going on that I think is? I think it is, but it's very, very slight. You have to train that to sort of come to the beginning of your brain, to the forefront of your brain, that feeling. Because the minute that feeling happens, this is a spot that needs to be edited. And the other part is just sort of like, you find yourself drifting in an edit. And if you're drifting in an edit, it's not your fault. It's theirs. You know what I mean? That's harsh, but that's what you have to do. If I'm reading through and somebody who's listening to my story is drifting, that is my fault. I have to keep you from drifting. So the same thing is if the shoe's on the other foot, then the same thing is true. If you're the editor, your job is not to be engaged. Their job is to engage you. So the minute you feel yourself drifting, that's another section that needs to be edited.
No, definitely. And you brought up things being unclear or hard to understand. When I've found as a writer, when I send things to my friends who are writers to have them proof a chapter, if I first ask them to indicate what they like and dislike, they might try to appease me or feel badly about hurting my feelings. So I always start with just point out what isn't clear. And that usually yields a much better result because they don't feel like they're being as judgmental towards me personally.
Right. Right.
So I always find that a really helpful place to start.
And that's even more important in audio because audio is like you can't go back and reread audio. You know what I mean? Well, now in the age of on-demand audio, you can go back. This is truer back in the radio days when there was literally no mechanism to go back and re-listen. And so what happens is the minute you're listening, if you're confused, you're like, wait, what was that thing? And you try to figure in your brain what was the thing that was confusing you. And then your brain has taken its eye off the ball basically and had not listened to the next sentence that's coming out. And then it's like a train wreck, like you never catch up. You know what I mean? So one moment of confusion can utterly destroy an otherwise beautiful story, And so you have to be on, a special guard about that in audio, I think particularly.
What does a producer do? So this has come up quite a bit. You mentioned you have a producer, for instance. What does for startup in particular? What does the producer do? What is their job?
I know it's one of those jobs. It's one of those words like manager, which is like, wait, what's a manager? So a producer, I think, also has many meanings. But in my case, what a producer does. So my producer helps me think through the interviews I'm going to do. Often will listen back through the tape, transcribe the tape sometimes, or make sure that it's transcribed. She will pull the interesting pieces of tape. Usually we'll consult about it, but then she'll go and actually produce a session in the editing software that we use that has the pulls that we want. She'll also think through like how to structure each episode, and all sorts of other things. When I was at This American Life, my job was producer. That was what I was called, and you basically help build the story with the reporter. You're really sort of like a partner in the creation of the story, and the reporter's voice is doing it, and the reporter is often sort of like writing and in some cases finalizing the writing, in some cases really doing most of the writing. But really you're a team. And structuring the story is so important, again, in audio especially, I think, just because you can get so confused easily. So generally what the producers are in the audio world are they're experts at sort of structuring the story. Like how does the story begin? And what are the emotional moments that we're leading to? And how do we contextualize those moments with script? So often when I was a producer at This American Life, we'd be working with writers who were really good writers who had not done that much audio. And often what I would do is I would cut the tape and then then we would meet and I would just sort of talk them through so we would have gone out and done a bunch of interviews. I would cut down to the moments that we were going to use and then we'd get back in the room and I would tell them okay, here's how I think you can start and here's what I think you want to say to start it up. And then we're going to go to this piece of tape and this is the first piece of tape we're going to use and it introduces this character in the story. And then from there, you're going to want to write something like this. And sometimes I would have dummy language in there and I would basically provide a roadmap for the reporter or the writer that would sort of lead through the tape and get to a finished piece. So that's
got it.
That's what they do. Yeah.
And at Gimlet Media, which is of course a much smaller operation than This American Life, who's handling releases and all of that kind of stuff?
Yeah, the producer would be doing that as well. So that's the funny. So producers sort of do sort of the high level conceptual structuring stuff, and then they also sort of transcribe tape, and they also sort of handle all the details and make sure that the plane tickets are purchased, and various people have been set up and booked into various studios and all that sort of stuff.
With I know we're getting into some nitty gritty stuff, but I'm so fascinated by it, and then we're going to go kind of broader picture. What type of editing software do you use?
Pro Tools.
Pro Tools.
Yeah.
And with Reply All, for instance, which is perhaps a little more can be planned a little more in advance. How from the initial idea pitch meeting to the finished episode, how long does that currently take? And how far out have you planned already? Not necessarily gathering all the info and doing the interviews, but decided on the subject matter for episodes.
Well, I mean, we're not as far planned out as we want to be. We have things on the calendar going out maybe a month or month and a half. But it's always a race every week to get everything done. So especially as you'll hear in the next episode of Startup. And so some of those are just ideas. Some of those are there's all the tape is in and it's been edited and we just have to sort of wrangle it into shape. But I would say that we don't have anything, we've never had, our goal is to sort of get to a point where we can have everything, where we can be a week ahead. We can have next week's episode in the can this week, done, recorded, the ads put in, everything done, mixed, the music in. And I would say we're several months away from that goal. We just need to get better at it and build that muscle.
What tools do you guys currently use? I of course, I'm an avid sort of hyper graphic note taker. Uh-huh. I heard Chartbeat mentioned in one of the episodes. What type of tools do you guys use for organizing all of this stuff besides Pro Tools? What are the software or the whiteboard? I mean, what do you guys use?
We use actual whiteboards. We have little whiteboards that float around the office that have the sort of the checklist of everything that needs to be done every episode. Just the basic stuff that you forget. Did we get the ad copy correct? Did we get did we email all the people? Did we write the copy for the web? Did we, all that stuff, Did we get the list of songs that we're using in the episodes that we can put them on the website? We do a lot of collaboration. So most of the stuff that we write, our scripts are all written in a Google Doc. And we have multiple people editing through the Google Doc. That really changed my world when that came around. And that's fantastic. We use Slack at the office like the younger guys do. I don't really know how to use it really. But I think those are the main ones. Like the Google Docs are sort of the main thing that we use to sort of collaborate right on. And then actual whiteboards. We schedule stuff through Google Calendar also.
Do you use any kind of project management software like Basecamp or Asana or Trello or anything like that?
I have worked on projects where I've used Basecamp before. Like when we did our website design, we used Basecamp with the design team that was designing the website. And that was really useful. Like I find Basecamp to be useful for like distributed teams. When I was at Planet Money, we did this big sort of crazy project where we followed a t-shirt around the world as it got made. And we did this sort of elaborate interactive website about the project where we had all these videos and stuff like that. And that was like a couple different teams, one in New York, one in DC. And we used Basecamp for that project as well. And that was really helpful. On a day-to-day basis, I don't use it as much, just cause, it's pretty simple what we're doing. The bulk of our work is sort of like, managing, wrangling tape and writing scripts. That's sort of like, that's the day-to-day. That's what I'm doing every day is that essentially.
What do you guys currently use for capturing tape in the field?
We use
in terms of equipment.
We use flash card recorders and nice microphones. We use these Tascam Tascam recorders. Some of us use Sony's, but they're pretty nice, broadcast quality, sort of, they're not the nicest, but they're the pretty nice ones. And then we have nice mics.
Mm-hmm. Now, what type of, if you know offhand, and I'm involved with Creative Live, so I managed to grab a PDF of some of your gear. I don't know if it's changed since then. Yeah. But I'm an advisor for Creative Live. And by the way, I'll link to it in the show notes for everyone, but I've been very impressed with the class. So we'll come back to that.
Oh, thanks.
But just the master class in asking questions. So of course I have performance anxiety right now. But
that's hilarious that you're anxious around me. Yeah. But,
that's why I decided to swing completely the opposite direction and ask very boring, hyper-specific tactical questions.
I think these are, the concrete details, that's another one that people forget. Like, people go too broad, and I think what's often interesting is the nuts and bolts of people's process. So I think often I'll ask these exact kind of questions, like sort of like on a day-to-day basis, like what are you actually doing? I do these Squarespace, I do these ads, right? And, where I just interview somebody in the company about what their job is like and the company that's sponsoring us. I guess we're going to do one of these ads later. But my goal there is just to try to find one sort of like, I call it like a vivid moment, a moment where it's sort of like, so one time I found myself talking to a treasurer of one company, and I was like talking, and like I wasn't getting very much vivid stuff. I was like sort of like, what's it like to be a treasurer? And wasn't getting very much. And finally I was like, do you actually sign your name on the checks? And he was like, we have an auto signer, but sometimes I actually sign the checks. And then we got into this whole discussion of sort of where he sits when he signs the checks and how he signs them and how much time
and how long
he allocates
it takes.
And does he block it off in his calendar? And that was like by far the best moment of the interview, because it felt, all of a sudden you were like, it felt real, and you got a real sense of sort of like the details of this guy's life. So I'm all for these kind of concrete questions.
Okay, well, I'm going to follow on with some digging then. I noticed in the list of equipment, and again, I'll link to all this in the show notes for people, that you have a boom mic. And I have, for instance, a Zoom recorder, a H4n, and I have another model. Mm-hmm. So two follow-up questions. Is there any reason you chose the Tascam over Zoom or anything else? And then the second is, what do you use the boom for? Because when I'm sitting down with someone, I find these handheld, the Zoom recorders, for instance, work quite well by themselves. They work even better with a lav mic or something like that, or just a handheld stage mic connected with XLRs. What do you use the boom mic for?
I mean, I can give you a lot of BS about it, but the truth is it's like habit, basically. Like, these were the microphones that we started using at This American Life. When I first got there, I didn't know anything about audio. I am not a super technically Like I know a lot about like story structure. I know exactly what I need to know about recording equipment. I'm not super tech savvy that way. And so partly it's just sort of like those are the ones we use, and I got used to them. And I can hear this. Now I understand. Like when I'm out in the field, I know exactly what I need to do with that particular mic to get the exact sound that I want to get, and I don't have to like mess around with something new. The one thing that I will say that I think the Tascam, that was the recommendation that I read on a website, and I bought it, and it's worked for me. Although there's certain things that I don't love about it. So I feel like you're fine. Whatever works for you, you're fine with there. The mic is more important than the recorder. So part of it is just sort of habit. Part of it, the real part, I guess, is that as long as it's a directional mic, what I'm trying to do often is get intimate sounding, conversations. And so if you have an omnidirectional mic, which is the mic's recording pattern is picking up from all around the whole field of, where you're recording. You just have to worry a little bit more about placement, and you sometimes don't get, it doesn't feel like they're as present. Whereas if you're using one of these, sort of unidirectional boom mics like the one I use, it's really weird. Like when you point it at somebody, you can hear them. And when you point it away, you really don't hear them very well. It really drowns out all the surrounding sound. And so what that means is you get this pretty nice, very, very intimate sound. And then if you're in a place where lots of other stuff is happening around and you want to document the fact that you're out in the field and there's a rodeo going on behind you or whatever, you can just, when you're done with the interview, you just point the mic at the rodeo and get that ambience. And then you can just use it as an ambience bed. So I like the intimacy that you get with a nice tight boom mic.
That makes perfect sense. What numbers do you check on a daily or weekly basis? And not to beat a dead horse, but do you guys use Chartbeat? Did you end up using that? And what other numbers besides just straightforward kind of revenue numbers for sponsors? What kind of stuff do you guys check?
I mean,
if anything.
I was obsessively checking our SoundCloud numbers because we host on SoundCloud. And so I could see, and SoundCloud feeds our iTunes. So every time anytime somebody who subscribed to Startup, it downloads to their phone that registers as a play on SoundCloud. So SoundCloud was sort of capturing both the people who are listening, streaming it through the web or through our website or whatever, and the people who are downloading it onto their phones through iTunes or some other podcatcher. So it was a one-stop shop for our listening numbers, basically. And so I would check that. And that was pretty much everything that I checked. I know PJ and Alex, the hosts of Reply All, are much more tech savvy, and much more, sort of aware of what's going on. And so every once in a while I'll ask them sort of like, what are they looking at? And they look at Chartbeat a lot. But we haven't, I don't look at that much.
Got it. So I want to rewind the clock a little bit and just, sure. I'm looking at your bio, and it says you've worked as a social worker, a caterer, an 8th grade science teacher, and a graduate level journalism professor. Tell me the story of how you got to radio, if you could. I guess the story starts, I was a teacher. I taught 8th grade science. And I did that for 4 years, and this was in Chicago. How old were you at the time? This was basically right after college. Around what time was this?
Yeah, this was in my mid to late 20s. So starting at maybe 24 to the time I was 28 or something like that, 28, 29. I was a teacher. And I had, basically it starts I'd always been interested in this kind of, I guess what you'd call long form narrative nonfiction. I had read, a couple magazines since the time I was in high school. Like I liked the New Yorker magazine and I liked Harper's magazine and I liked these and I would read these books of like, sort of like, Joseph Mitchell, who's this sort of famous old, nonfiction writer. And I would read, E.B. White and stuff like that. John Hershey, the guy who wrote Hiroshima. So, or is it Hershey? Hershey, right? And so I was into that kind of stuff. And then I would, but I never, for some reason, and I was a pretty good student and I I did okay, but somehow it never occurred to me that I could actually do that for a living. I don't know why. Like, I really don't know why. I thought, I just somehow thought that like the people who did that were some sort of different world of people that like I would never be able to access that world. And like now it's ridiculous. Like the thought that like, an upper middle class Jewish kid could ever make it in the media world. Like how, of course, like, how could that happen? I don't know why I was so, I don't know why I was so, I think it was just like a profound lack of, I didn't know anybody who'd ever done that. I grew up in Cincinnati, Ohio, which was like, not super provincial, but just, certainly not a media capital. And so, people who succeeded became doctors and lawyers, and that was sort of it. So then I started dating a girl from New York, when I was in Chicago, and, that was more of where media happened, and she knew people who were actually getting jobs at magazines. And I was like, oh, getting a job at a magazine is an actual thing. And then we dated for a while. We dated for like 4 or 5 years. And then, she eventually broke up with me, which was like one of the more profound experiences of my life. And that was really what kicked me in the ass and sort of was like, and that happened right, in my late 20s. And that was when I was like, okay, well, if you're going to like, I don't know what I was telling myself, like, it was basically spite. Like I was worried. Her plan was to go back to New York and go to film school. And I was just like terrified that she was going to become a famous director and I was going to be sitting around supervising recess. and so it was really that was like, okay, you gotta try to, this has been this dream that you haven't really admitted to yourself. So you should just try to do it. So I started trying to freelance and I had an internship at Harper's Magazine that I successfully applied to and got over the summer in between one of those years when I was teaching. And then eventually through Harper's I got a job as the administrative assistant at This American Life, which was, the public radio program and podcast that was just starting. This is back in back in 97, October of 97 when I got that internship, when I got the administrative assistant job. And it had been on the air, I think 2 years at that point, and had become sort of, had already made a name for itself, but wasn't, the, beast that it is today. The podcast kingmaker that it is today. So that got me started. So I was an administrative assistant. I sort of learned on the job. It was like 4 of us back then. It was Ira, 3 producers, and me.
What a perfect timing, man.
Yeah.
What a great job.
Yeah.
Just the 4 of you. That's amazing.
Yeah. And I learned a lot on the job. But I was the administrative assistant, right? I was like the one writing, answering the mail and sort of like running to the post office and doing all the stuff that needed to be done. And because we were so short-staffed back then and because Ira really had no idea what he was getting himself into, like a weekly hour of documentary radio where like the standards are higher than anybody has ever had before. Like he is a perfectionist, and I learned a lot about the value of being a perfectionist from him. But the fact that he was trying to produce that with, 3 producers who didn't really know what they were doing because nobody knew what they were doing, like he was trying to invent it. So it was all hands on deck. And so occasionally I would get to produce stuff or like help with the editorial side of things. And so I learned on the job. But then there came a moment where I was like, I'd actually produced So, like, not what I would call producing now, but I assisted in the creation of one of our big early shows, which was an hour-long documentary about Harold Washington and the first black mayor of Chicago. And it was sort of a hit, in the early days. And I came in after, and it had been, just a bear to produce, and I was working all kinds of crazy hours. And I came in after it aired, the Monday after it aired, and fully expecting, like, okay, now I've succeeded. I passed this test, and now I'm going to be made a producer. And I said, I wanted, what did he think? Was he going to make me a producer? And he was like, no, I can't. I don't have money to make you a producer. I don't have a position open. And I need an administrative assistant. And I was like, oh, well, if you ever did have money and the position open, would you hire me? And he was like, I don't know. Probably not, because you don't have the experience still that I need. There's other people now who have that experience. And I was like, well, what do I need to get that experience? And he said, well, I don't know. You probably should quit and start freelancing. And I don't think he thought, and now as a CEO of my own company, I have this experience all the time where I'll sort of think out loud, and I don't realize that the people I'm talking to are like hanging on every word. I'm sure that was what happened with him. But to me, I was like, okay, well, you've just given me the map of how I want to get my dream job, so I'm going to quit. So I put in my notice, and I arranged like a loan from my parents to help me live for the year, like $10,000. I was like, if you give me $10,000 in lieu of graduate school, I will going to make it as a freelance writer. And I did. I just tried to freelance, and I got stories in magazines and art and newspapers and stuff like that. And I continued to do radio. And then a year and a half later, I'd sort of built a little freelance career for myself, which was going pretty well. And then there was finally an opening at This American Life, and things had been going so well that I actually was like, oh, I'm not going to apply for that because now I'm doing this other thing. And then finally somebody was like, this was your dream job, right? And I was like, yeah, I guess it was. And then I applied, and then immediately I was like, I really want this job. And then I got it. So that was how that happened.
Wow. So when you were freelancing, let's see here, the writing that you were doing, did you find the writing took off more so than the radio? Were they taking off in tandem? Did the radio start to outpace the writing? How did that go during your year of freelancing?
Well, one of the things that I learned one of the biggest lessons I learned is never, ever return your key card. So I still had my key card from WBEZ, the radio station where I had been working. And so
Coming up, why good radio doesn't necessarily apply to television, the value of perfectionism, and the good and bad habits that Alex picked up from This American Life and Ira Glass. But first, a word from our sponsors. The Tim Ferriss Show is brought to you by Onnit. I have used Onnit products for years. If you look in my kitchen, in my garage, you will find Alpha Brain, chewable melatonin for resetting my clock when I'm traveling, kettlebells, battle ropes, maces, steel clubs. It sounds like a torture chamber, and it kind of is. It's a torture chamber for self-improvement. And you can see all of my favorite gear at onnit.com/Tim. That's ONNIT.com/Tim. And you can also get a discount on any supplements, food products. I like Hemp Force. I like Alpha Brain. Check it all out. onnit.com/Tim. The Tim Ferriss Show is also brought to you by 99 Designs. 99 Designs is your one-stop shop for anything graphic design related. You need a logo, you need a website, you need a business card, or anything else. You get an original design from designers around the world who submit drafts for you to review. You are happy or you get your money back. And I have used 99 Designs for book cover ideas for the 4-Hour Body, which went to #1 New York Times, for banner ads. And you can check out some of my actual competitions at 99designs.com/Tim. You can also get a free $99 upgrade if you want to give it a shot. That's 99designs.com/Tim. And now, back to the show. Tandem? Did the radio start to outpace the writing? How did that go during your year of freelancing?
Well, one of the things that I learned one of the biggest lessons I learned is never, ever return your key card. So I still had my key card from WBEZ, the radio station where I had been working. And so I could come in and I had some freelance projects that I was still working on at that station. So they had hired me to help produce this like poetry series they were doing. And so I was picking up freelance work both in radio and on the writing side, and it was pretty equal. Like I did a big radio documentary and I did something for a show called The Savvy Traveler, which was a travel show back then. So within the public radio world, there was enough stuff that needed to be done and not that many people who were like sort of free to do it that I could pick up, sort of work at that point as well. So it was about half and half.
Got it. And how did you come to then co-found Planet Money? Because and what was the timeline between landing that dream job as producer and getting to Planet Money?
So I guess there was a year. I mean, no, there was a decade in between getting the job. I got the job in 99, and then Planet Money started in 2009. And one of the nice things about working at This American Life was that like the job was constantly changing as I was there. So I never had to I never got bored. I started and I sort of took a long time. The learning curve was pretty steep to get good at producing documentary radio. So it took first couple of years I was just trying to get my head above water and figure out how this stuff worked and what people were talking about in these edits and, how to become better at recognizing good moments and all that stuff. And then 9/11 was it sounds cheesy and trite to say, but 9/11 sort of changed the focus of the show quite a bit. We became, we did a couple of shows on 9/11 and then we just got, I think it made us a little bit more, we'd always been serious journalistically, but I think it felt like we were able to tell kinds of stories that were both sort of journalistic and human in a way that felt like it filled a niche a little bit. So we did a lot of reporting on that and on the war, and we went to an aircraft carrier, so that sort of changed. And then we did a TV show in there too. So we did this big TV show for Showtime, and I was an executive producer on the TV show. So then I was spending, 3 or 4 years learning how to do TV, which was a whole other huge learning curve. And man, did we get our asses handed to us there. We thought we were storytelling experts, and then we got into this new medium and we're like, nothing we know works.
Could you give some examples? Because I'd love some examples.
Yeah, well, it's
or an explanation of why it doesn't work. Why didn't it translate?
Well, everything that I laid out to you about what's good tape, what you're going for in a radio interview, that stuff doesn't apply to TV. So I'll often, you can make an amazing radio story out of 1 or 2 people telling a story that happened to them in the past. One of my first, I won a big award called the Third Coast Audio Award at This American Life, which was essentially 2 people, a brother and a sister, talking about a story that happened to them, 60 years ago. And it was just the 2 of them talking, and we intercut them and we put in a little bit of script. And it was one of the most moving stories that I've ever produced. And that's death on television. You can't watch people telling a story about something that happened a long time ago. Something about it just does not work. And we would try to produce these things and we'd be watching them and we'd be bored out of our skulls. Cause there's just you just need so much more visual information than just watching watching people talk. So that was one of the big lessons. Is sort of it made me realize TV, that's why reality television is so big. You can do it. You can produce a story from the past, but to do it, you have to you have to give people something to watch. And so you have to invent an entire visual story to go along with the story that the person is telling. And that's really expensive. So if you look at an Errol Morris documentary or something like that, where there was that one where he. What
would be an example of one of
so the Fog of War? The Fog of War was one that I thought about a lot. Yeah. So that's the one where he interviews. Who's the interview? What's his name? The guy from Vietnam.
I haven't seen the movie.
Okay, he interviews a famous general from Vietnam who was one of the ones that sort of like came under a lot of criticism. And it's a lot about like what went on back then, in Vietnam. And if you watch the movie now, and I watched that movie around this time and I was like, oh, look at what he did. Like he filled every second, every frame with like invented imagery that he had to invent and come up with. And it's so time consuming and so expensive versus
sounds like Man on Wire.
Yes. And Man on Wire. Exactly. The same type of thing. And if you watch that movie now, they have to do so much work to keep the screen covered with interesting things to watch versus if you just take, your average reality show where you've got like two family members fighting with each other. That's the narrative crack in visual terms. Like we are hardwired to watch that stuff and it's so much cheaper. You just turn the camera on and you watch two people fighting and you want to watch it. You know what I mean? and so it made me realize, oh, that's why TV is the way it is because that's what we want to watch. We don't want to watch, we want to watch things moving on screen. So it was really hard. And so we had to think entirely differently. We had to think entirely visually. Like what's an interesting visual story versus an interesting audio story?
Yeah, and I suggest anyone listening who enjoys reality television not learn too much about how it's produced because it will shatter the veneer. I remember I was talking to this guy who's worked on a bunch of reality shows you would recognize, and he said, "Have you ever noticed how many of the arguments happen with people standing up in the kitchen and someone's always mixing something?" He's like, "Do you think that happens naturally?" I thought it was like, that's a good point. They are always arguing in the kitchen and someone's just absent-mindedly stirring something that we never really find out about.
Right, exactly.
But I wanted to come back to perfectionism because you mentioned you learn the benefits of working with a perfectionist, or maybe you said being a perfectionist. And you also mentioned the New Yorker. So I had a chance I was very fortunate to have the chance to study nonfiction writing for a semester with John McPhee, who's a staff writer for the New Yorker and just a phenomenal writer with the greatest attention to detail and structure of anyone I've ever met. But I'd be curious to hear sort of what did you learn from working with Ira? What are the benefits of being a perfectionist or working for one?
I think it basically what I learned is that a lot of it is just about the effort you put in, and it's not about like you have to have a creative brain, and like part of it is that you're just sort of born with, I guess partly you're sort of born with part of it at least, but like watching Ira like sort of like work. A lot of times he just keeps thinking about it longer than other people keep thinking about it. And then eventually he comes up with an idea that's good. And it just made me realize like that's how people get to good ideas is they go through a lot of bad ideas first. And that there's not really like occasionally a good idea comes to you first if you're lucky. But like usually it only comes after a lot of bad ideas. And so what being a perfectionist is sort of just like putting in a little bit more time to think through the level 1 or the level 2 ideas and try to get to something that's a little bit deeper. And I think that's why we do as many edits as we do, because often what happens in an edit is you'll take a bad idea and you'll make it into a good idea over the course of several edits. And you'll have an idea that's in a script that's sort of like, that's just getting you from one point to another point. And then you'll be like, you know what this is like? It's like this. And you'll come up with a good metaphor. And then you'll be able to like, oh, that's a good metaphor to put in this part of the script. It'll really make it sing. And then eventually you'll get to a part where you're like, oh, it feels like a revelation will now happen at this point in the piece. Whereas before it was just moving from one thing that happened to the next. So I think that I learned that. And then,
are there any examples? Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm going to come back. No, I was just going to ask you, are there any examples of perhaps from Startup and Reply All, but it could be from previous shows, of a specific bad idea that was turned into a good idea or that became a good idea?
Yeah. I mean, it happens every single time. So, I'm trying to think of one that I could share that was like, that's easy enough to explain. Let me think for one more second. I don't know. This might be hard to do.
Sure. We can come back to it. I want to, feel free to
I'll
pick up where you left off, but maybe.
Yeah. Let me think about it for a second. I can come up with an example for you, but.
Okay. Are there any habits that you picked up from Ira or the This American Life team otherwise that you still have? Any particular working habits? Either or both.
So the good habit that I picked up is sort of like being committed to excellence. Like that is something that I learned. And I learned it from Ira. Like I think he really just hated to have something go out when it could have been better. And if he had an idea of how to make it better, he would almost always try to make it better. And still does. And that's like, that was, and I was not that way. I was sort of like the kind of guy who was like, yeah, it's good enough, you know? And what I realized is that, that was sort of I think being that way is a little bit of a dodge or a rationalization or an emotional sort of like thing you do to sort of like not actually try to make things good. Cause trying to make things good is scary. And you might fail and people might say it sucks. And we all know that. And so we all like find our ways of rationalizing with it and that's what I was doing. I was like, it doesn't matter. It's okay. And so working with Ira, like I was like, oh no, this is a guy who really cares about making it good. And of all the things to care about in the world, that's one of the better ones, you know, just to try to make something excellent. Like there's a lot of things you can care about and that's a good thing to care about. So I learned that from him. There's a certain comfort with crisis that he had that I'm afraid wore off on me also. That I don't think is a good thing. I think that's a bad thing. Can
you give any particular moment come to mind? Let's leave it at.
The show was always like for the entire time I worked at This American Life, it was always like up until the very last minute, it was getting produced and edited and, you know, it was always like, it was, you know, you would be shocked. Probably like 20 to 30% of the time you were like, is it even going to go up? And that's crazy, you know, over like 15 years.
That's a lot.
To be like 20 to 30% of the time, are we going to make it this time? I mean, and then at a certain point I was like, oh yeah, we're always going to make it because we always make it. But still, it's like, it's always right up into the last minute. And it's better now. It's way better now. And like they've gotten like processes in place and stuff. But, and part of it is just audio is real time. So even if you've been doing it for a long time, you just can never quite get your head around how long it takes. But part of it is just sort of like he's comfortable with that. And I think in a certain way it focused his mind, I think. And I think it also focuses my mind, I think. Like I've noticed myself doing like this episode recently, like, I'm the one who's writing it. And I've got a whole bunch of other things that I have to do on top of writing the script for this week's episode. And it's like I sit down and I try to think, but I'm like worried about this thing and I'm worried about that thing. And in the back of my mind, in this bad part that I learned, I think is, but I still have, Monday morning at 5 a.m. I'll just get up early, I still have that in the back of my mind. And at that point I'll have no choice and I will have to make it good. And so I'll just leave it till that moment. And I don't think that's not good. And what it does is it drags everybody else into your crisis. And so Caitlin, my producer, is like dragged into my way of managing my time and my way of sort of trying to make things good. And that's, I don't think she likes it. And I didn't like it when I was a producer. Like I felt like, why is he saving everything till the last minute? And I'm doing the exact same thing, to my stuff now. So I think that's because I learned all those, I had 20 years of learning, like, it always comes out, it's fine. So it's bad, but it's bad, so.
Yeah, I've learned that I've developed a similar level of comfort with crisis and last minute turnarounds, and I from personal experience learned the hard way that is a very fast way to burn people out who haven't been conditioned, and how you can lose really good talent, unfortunately. The commitment to excellence. Are there any stories that come to mind of particular time? For instance, you passed something on to Ira that you thought was good enough, and he was like, no, not good enough, and gave it back to you. Did that happen?
Yeah. Oh, I mean, all the time. Like every single thing I ever read or did, was, I never, and this is not an exaggeration, I don't think anybody ever in the history of This American Life has ever had this happen, where they'll read a draft, even if it's the second or third draft, and it'll be like, and the answer is like, all right, it's all done. It's like, there's always a new tweak, and there's always something that can make it better. And often there's like big thoughts. And so, and again, like, and in the beginning it would sting a little bit. It would be like, God, I just want to do one thing where it's like done and I did it right. I took it really personally, like I'm not doing it right. And then it was only over time that I realized that like, no, nobody does it right. Like the first draft always sucks, always, for everybody. And you just got to get over yourself a little bit. Like it's not about you and your ego. It's just about trying to make it better. And then I realized that it was like, that's really useful, to be able to have that muscle of like, sort of like, okay, I trust myself enough that I'm not a complete idiot. But that it's always, and I can be made better by other people's input and ideas. That's essentially what an edit is. And that's also a really good way of going through the world, is to try to be open to what people are telling you. So that was I think that's, the commitment to excellence means being comfortable hurting people's feelings and being comfortable having your feelings hurt. And to try to take the feelings out of it. And just talk about like what the thing you're trying to do is. And that was really useful to learn.
And would Ira ever just say, this isn't good enough, give it another shot? Or was it always very specific feedback?
Oh, always very specific feedback. Always very specific.
Got it.
Not do it again better. Like that's sort of like,
yeah.
And that's also, I think, what being a good editor is, because he was such a master of like the form that he could tell you what was wrong, and he could tell you like, this isn't working for this reason. And often it's like really stupid little things. Like, so for example, I can give you an example of this, like from this current episode of Startup that we just did. It's all about burnout. and basically we made the stupid decision to, it's coming out today. I think it'll be up by the time this posts, so people can listen to it. But basically we had this situation where like the hosts of Reply All were working. They were working late, sort of like every day for like weeks. And this was over the holidays when we made the stupid decision to try to put up a show on Christmas and on New Year's Eve. I don't know why we didn't take the week off, but we didn't. I think we felt like we were just new. We were just starting. So it was too early to take time off or something. So they were crashing, trying to get these shows up on Christmas Eve and on New Year's Eve. And the shows weren't coming together very well, and they were just working really, really late. And then, Lisa started recording conversations with them about like how they were feeling. They were feeling super burned out, and it's really good. It's really good tape. And so that's what the episode is about. And we were scripting the episode, and I started and this all happened. It came to a head when I was out of town. I was in San Francisco, where my wife's family lives, and we brought the kids out there over the holidays. But I was like, it was supposed to be sort of a vacation, but I was basically working the whole time. But there was a day or two that I didn't work. And so I started the story by saying like, all this happened while I was on vacation. It was just like one line or something like that. But that one line put this whole and the story was pretty good, and we were just telling the story, and we were playing all this pretty entertaining tape of people talking about how burnt out they were and how their whole feelings about their jobs had changed, and it's all very real, very raw, very entertaining. But something about me saying that I was on vacation had this whole scoldy tone all the way through it, which is sort of like, I leave for one day and the whole place goes to hell, sort of, which was not intended at all. But that was, it had that feeling. It sort of cast the entire episode in this sort of like unpleasant light. And so that's what I'm saying. Like, it was, and we were doing these edits and we were like, this should be good. Like, the tape should be good. But when we were listening, we were like, I don't like it. It's making me feel bad, not good. And it wasn't until I was like, one of our Starley put, I think one of our other employees put her finger on it. She was like, it's that's the thing that's making it feel bad. Is that just that line in the beginning where you just sort of, it colors the whole way you're hearing this thing. And so we just recrafted the beginning to be about like this transition in a startup's life, where you go from trying to raise the money to all of a sudden you're running the organization, right? And they're two totally different jobs. And like, this is an episode about how we were trying to manage the second phase of actually running the company and dealing with our employees. And so that gave it a much better context, basically, to listen to the story in.
So how far into the episode did you put your finger on that and fix it? So from the first kind of pitch meeting or decision to make the episode about burnout, what amount of time elapsed before you're like, oh, okay, that's this issue we need to fix?
It was probably like we did this edit and we actually put together a rough mix, which we all listened to over the weekend. And that was the one we were all like freaking out because it wasn't working at all. And we were like, oh my God, this is a stinker. And
the rough mix is like missing music. It's just a bunch of tape strung together.
Yeah. It's a little bit more than that because it was like we had a really good guy doing it. But yes, it was like the levels weren't all mastered and everything like that. We knew that we were going to come back.
Do you do scratch audio for the script as well, or no?
We had recorded the script. So we'd done the whole thing. Like this was actually more work than we normally do. Normally this would have been a second edit, but we were like sort of behind the guns. We were like, well, maybe this will work. So, but it didn't. So it was essentially like a second edit, and we did the second edit. And we realized that it wasn't working. And then it was over the weekend, basically, that we were thinking about it. And then this morning was when we sort of like, I came in and rewrote the top based on sort of notes that Starley had given me last night at 10. And there was a couple other things that were happening in the episode that were also sort of like robbing it of its power, that we changed as well. But yeah, it was probably like a couple of days of sort of like sitting and thinking with it. That's the other thing that I learned from Ira also about excellence. Like, excellence is just tricks. It's just managing your time and your expectations. Because there's this panic where you do, like, when I first heard the rough mix, I was panicked because I was like, this is bad. This is a bad show. But I have seen, but then I had to remember, like, okay, but you thought some part of it was good in the beginning. And you have to go back and remember, what was the part that was good? And there's some reason that something that was good has now become bad. There's something that you're doing wrong that you have to fix. It's not a crisis. You know what I mean? It's just sort of like it's a problem to solve. And it's just hard to remember that sometimes. Like, you just get, and I think that's what, with experience, you start to realize, like, you've done it enough times, like you've taken something that was bad and you've made it good, that you realize, like, it's not the end of the world, or it's not like something that can't be fixed. Cause that's the feeling. You feel like, oh my God, there's nothing to be done. Like, the thing that I thought was good is bad.
So I'd love to talk about, ask just a few more long form questions, a couple of fast ones, and then we can wrap up. But I want to talk about turning a bad situation into a good one. Very specifically, I'd love to chat about startup episode number 9. We made a mistake. So, and sort of about being attacked and villainized. So maybe just for context, if you could explain to people what that mistake was, and then I'd love to dig into that a little bit.
Yeah, so we do these ads on the show. We have 2 ads in the middle of the show, and we produce our ads documentary style. So what we try to do is we just try to interview people either in the company or users of the company about their own real experiences, and we turn those into little 45 to minute long segments for as our advertisements. And one of our sponsors was Squarespace and the website company. And what we were doing is we were talking to different Squarespace users about their Squarespace sites. And we'd found this kid, this lovely, charming little boy who had a Squarespace site that he used for Minecraft. And we'd done this interview with him, and it had been lovely. And then we put it up, and we realized that we had never told him or his mother that it was for an ad. And she had the impression that this kid was going to be on This American Life, like that her son was going to be on This American Life. And then she heard from a friend that it was actually used in this ad, and then she got very upset, and she went on Twitter and was talking about it on Twitter, and she had a large Twitter following, and so a lot of her Twitter followers were upset as well. And then we started digging into the details, and it was like a little bit even worse because like it turned out that the email that we'd sent to her had sort of, given the impression that I did still work at This American Life, which was made it seem even sleazier. I don't know. It was like a really bad screw up on our part that seemed to her quite logically and rightfully that it had been on purpose and an intentional deception.
And I enjoyed the episode for a host of reasons, but I mean, the first of which is we all make mistakes. The second of which is how quickly things can spiral or seemingly spiral out of control with the internet
Yes.
and social media, and how much of a crisis it can seem like. And just like you working as a producer, I've been sort of on the front lines online for a good period of time now. So when someone's like, oh, like this like parody piece came out about your book in the New York Times, and now I'm just like, interesting. I guess I should take a look at it later this afternoon. I don't have the like, oh my God, the sky is falling, everything is over.
Right.
Response.
Which we very much
not always.
Which we very much had. I definitely realize that now. Like it was like sort of like, and there was a couple of people who were sort of visiting the office around that time, and they were like, "We think you're overreacting," and it was like it just, which we definitely were, I think. But it did feel like this, like the company was so new and so young, and we've managed to do this thing, which I wasn't sure I was going to be able to pull off, which was sort of like to document making all these mistakes, and still have people like along for the ride with you. You know what I mean?
Right.
And like, cause a lot of times when you make mistakes, you're not at your best, you're at your worst. You're sort of your unpleasant side, or the part of you that's sort of a dick or whatever is sort of coming forward. And, to sort of air all that and still have people sort of on our side and supporting the company and supporting the show, we felt like we were already walking a tightrope, and this felt like this was going to be the thing that knocked us off.
And no, definitely. And what I was curious to ask you is, as someone who's been on the documenting side for so long, looking at different situations, documenting other people's lives, perhaps painting them not in a negative light, but in a neutral or comprehensive light. If you went back to say interviewing people and covering people for hard-hitting news or something like that, like, has your viewpoint changed, or your feelings about that? Because a lot of journalists absolve themselves of the damage they might do to someone if it gets a lot of clicks or a lot of views or a lot of listens. And I know that This American Life is at least all the episodes I've heard are very constructive, but I'm just wondering how your feelings as a journalist or documentarian changed as a result of becoming a target yourself.
Well, I think I definitely, I definitely have changed from where I was in the very beginning when I first started. I was never like a gotcha journalist. Like I was never like out for the expose.
Right.
And so like that wasn't, and at This American Life in particular, that's one of the other things that I think I learned a lot from Ira is that he really didn't want to just do the story where you didn't get the comment from the person who was supposed to be the villain in the story or whatever. Like he really was trying to understand everybody's point of view. And that's what makes that show great. And I feel like that was an amazing lesson to learn. But it was, in the beginning, I didn't take it as seriously as I do now. Like, I don't think I've ever left anybody. There's one story that I regret, where it was a story about testing, in North Carolina, about standardized testing. And, I interviewed a bunch of different people, in North Carolina who were sort of pushing this, pretty heavy standardized test thing, in the state. And I ended up interviewing one of the main guys who was behind the testing thing. And it got into this really testy interview, and testy in the bad way, not about testing. And I think and he accused me of having an agenda. And I did. Like I was a teacher. I didn't like standardized tests. And I told myself at the time that I was an open-minded person. I was trying to do this in an open-minded way. But I think looking back on it now, I would have done it differently. I would have tried to find every side of it, instead of just trying to tell the side that I wanted to, which isn't to say that if you have a point of view that you believe to be true, you can't tell that point of view, but it's always a better story when you're trying to understand the other side. And in fact, So, and I feel like now that I am, and that, getting it back to your question of sort of like being on the other side of this whole sort of Twitter thing, that's how I felt. I felt like totally misunderstood, and that like people had not bothered to figure out like what had gone on with me, even though, I didn't feel misunderstood because I felt like once I understood what was going on, I totally got why they thought what was happening. And it did look really fishy. So I get it. But you do feel like, wait, this is just a mistake, and there's no way to convince people of that. It's really scary. And so I have a lot of, I see that happening in the news a lot, I think, where like, journalists take it, sort of take it out on somebody, and where I feel like,
all the time.
There's another story there. Yeah.
No, definitely. And I made a decision early on not to attack people on my blog, for instance, which was really the first sort of property that I focused on. And, partially because I felt like to attack people and tear things down is kind of cheap applause. It's going for cheap applause. It's like, it's like doing a bit on, George W. Bush with a series of jokes as a stand-up comedian. It's like, okay, like at the worst point in his presidency, it's like, of course you're going to get some claps, but it's like, you can do better than that. I feel like you can. So I'd love to, I've been just very impressed with the shows that you've done so far. I really look forward to what's coming down, the pike, but I'd love to ask you some sort of rapid fire questions. And, sure. By rapid fire just means I'm asking them in short form, but you can feel free to expand if you'd like. Is there a particular book, or what is the book that you've gifted to other people most often, given as a gift?
Oh man. What is the, God, I don't even know. It's been like, so here's the horrible thing. I am so bad now about reading. I think, and I blame my young children, which is also bad. But it's seriously, ever since I had two children. So I have a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old, and, I'm doing this job now, and my wife has this really demanding job, and we just literally have no time to read. So to me, books are almost oppressive because all they are just sort of guilt and reminders that I don't have any free time. So I don't even see them as gifts anymore. all I have is negative associations with them.
They're homework assignments.
Right. Yeah, I just feel guilty and sad. I'm hoping, okay. And I've heard that changes. And it's funny, I had this experience yesterday or 2 days ago where I I had a free moment and I read something that a friend of mine recommended on Twitter, and it was this blog called The Tusk, and it was this really lovely essay by this woman who was working in San Francisco, and it was the first real sort of like time that I'd sat and just done the thing that I love doing, which is like reading a really nicely crafted piece of writing. And I was like, oh, maybe things are starting to turn now. And it was just so foreign. I hadn't done it in like 4 years. And I was like, okay, I think I'm going to start to be able to get my life of the mind back soon. But like, it's one of the more ironic things about, one of the more paradoxical things about producing all this content is that like, I don't like the amount that my diet of what I read and listen to myself has just gone so shriveled. Yeah, it's so sad.
Does any favorite documentary or documentaries come to mind?
Yes, documentaries are an easier answer. I loved Man on Wire. That was like one of my favorite things that I've ever seen. The book that I read though? There was a book that I read that I thought was just unbelievably fantastic, which was called On the Run. And it was about
On the Run.
Yeah. Alice Goffman. She's a sociologist, and it was just sort of like basically she ended up sort of like living in this black neighborhood in Philly. She's a white sociologist. She ended up living in a black neighborhood in Philly for like 10 years. Just it started as like a sociology assignment and then just became her life. And she became friends with these 3 guys who were sort of like who lived in the neighborhood and had rap sheets and were and just sort of like fully just sort of like it's this book that I haven't read before, where like she totally lived life through their eyes and sort of internalized everything about what it was like to be sort of like a poor black man in Philly in sort of an increasingly police presence neighborhood. And it was just devastating and amazing. And like, it just made me like understand everything that's happening in the country in a different way. So, cause I, like a lot of white people, I think had this feeling of like, sort of like, however you feel, like there's always this feeling of like, why, like, well, whatever. It's like it was an amazing book.
Great. On the Run.
Yeah.
All right. Wrote that down. When you think of the word, when you hear the word successful, who's the first person who comes to mind and why?
Success is a funny thing. Like Barack Obama is a very successful person. I mean, like, I feel like there's like when I think of success, I feel like there's 2 layers of success. There's a sort of the outsized success that is like, we're just sort of like amazing sort of people who I feel like are like have skills and abilities far outside my own succeed. And that's your like, sort of like Barack Obama is like that, sort of like, wow, how did that guy become president? Like somebody, sort of like, Bill Clinton, same kind of thing, like sort of like where you come from like a, not a background of privilege necessarily. And you got these oratorical skills and you do, so, that's one thing. But then there's other people who just sort of like have managed to like carve out, a nice life for themselves, which I feel like also is just sort of like is successful, where they have like, they have like they have people that they love and they have friends and family nearby and they've arranged their lives so that it's, they have like time to actually take pleasure in the things that give them pleasure. And by that standard, I'm not very successful myself. Like, I worry about that. Yeah.
Who would you like to emulate more? Are there any particular people in your life or people you know of that you'd like to emulate to sort of carve out that type of the life that you want for yourself?
I don't think about that stuff very much. Like, I really wanted, like when I was younger, I really wanted a mentor. I really wanted somebody who I could learn from and learn what my life would be like and like learn a skill and learn, something that would give me meaning in the world. And when I started working at This American Life, that's what I felt like I found. I got like I was like, okay, now I have a path that I'm on and I'm going to be on that path. But once I was on that path, it was like, now I'm just sort of like pretty consumed by it, you know? I don't, who am I trying to emulate? I'm not really trying to emulate anybody. I don't think. Maybe I'm not being honest with myself, but I feel like it's like, I have a very particular thing I'm trying to do, and I feel like sort of too busy to like with that thing, and I'm too focused on that thing to look around for other people that I would be emulating here. You know what I mean? Like I'm pretty, I've always been a little tunnel vision that way. Like I'm just like, I just sort of dive into the project that's before me.
Are there any, now that you're a co-founder, yourself of a startup, are there any particular founders or CEOs that you admire? Who might not be the Barack Obamas in their respective fields, right? So not necessarily a Zuckerberg or someone like that, but so someone where you're like, okay, that person is handling things in a way that I might want to at some point, or anyone who particularly impresses you or that you admire.
You know, I don't know that many entrepreneurs. You know, like I come out of public radio. Most of my colleagues are still in the world of audio. And I haven't met very many people. So I don't even know how to answer that question. Like I think the one thing I will say is that the more I've started running my own operation, the more things that I've realized, the more things I like about the more things I learned from Ira that I think are useful, from Ira Glass at This American Life. Like I think, like I do like the ability, like he really was like the thing that he did really well was he made people excited about the mission. And he did that by caring about the quality of the thing that we were putting together, and he made it feel meaningful. And I think that's really important. And so that's one of the things that I've held with me. I think that was really, really important. And I try to do that as well.
Well, if you don't know many co-founders or CEOs, next time you're in San Francisco to visit the in-laws or the wife's family, we should put together a dinner of some type just for the hell of it. I think that'd be a good time.
I mean, who do you have people like that you're like, oh, that guy's doing it well, or she's really got it going?
I do. And you know, one of them is a close friend of mine who was in your first episode. That's Chris Sacca. So as an investor, you know, I've been an early stage investor in a lot of companies, like whether it be Twitter or advisor to Uber, et cetera, Evernote. And Chris was one of the very early mentors I had, and he's a close friend, but he also is very, very good, obviously, at the early stage startup game. So it was really Mike Maples Jr. initially, and then Chris Sacca, and also a guy named Naval Ravikant, who are spectacularly good at what they do, and they have a methodical way of dissecting certain types of problems. And so I try to, I enjoy learning their respective recipes, you know, their kind of algorithms that they use for evaluating things, because they're all clearly effective, but they're also sometimes very different, which I find fascinating. So in the startup world, since I'm not, there are people, just because I'm running, you know, I have my own fledgling podcast, and then the blog, which is much more established, and so on. There are people in the, and I don't really love the content creation label, but people in the content sphere, whether it be audio or written word or even video and television, that I really respect a lot. You know, I find what Morgan Spurlock does very fascinating, for instance, who was kind of in front of the camera and behind the camera, but now does both, including things that make him very much behind the scenes. So I mean, I guess I've been on my own. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I know a couple of people who are working with his company, and he seems to, it seems like a great, you know, he seems like he's doing a really good job running.
Yeah, he's
making it a nice hub for where, you know, where cool things can happen.
Yeah, he's very good at establishing rapport with just any group you can imagine. So with, Inside Man, I think it is. I don't think it's Inside Job, Inside Man. It's really it's just incredible to see how quickly he can establish rapport with people. So I'm going to ask you perhaps the opposite of the word successful, not failure, but what's the first face that comes to mind when you think of and you're a very nice guy, so this might be hard to answer, but what's the first face that comes to mind when you think of the word punchable?
Punchable. Oh, Tim.
That could be your answer too. But,
I'm just trying to decide. So I will tell you this. Like, I feel like coming from, coming from the nonprofit world, like where I never had, this is my first full-time job in the for-profit sector. It's being the CEO of my own company. Since I was like
it's a hell of a way to start.
Yeah. And I think, and coming from the public radio world and the nonprofit world at large, like I do think there is a way that we conceive of ourselves as punchable in that world. Like that we're like not, that we need, that like we need to be shielded from this world of profit, and like somehow that there's like that it's dangerous and it's filled with people who will sort of eat you for breakfast. And I think, I mean, that's like a gross exaggeration. And lots of people in the nonprofit world are like, like this is a gigantic overgeneralization, just so you know. But I do think there's like a slight attitude that I ran into at public radio and other places that like that we're shielded in this world from having to do, from like some sort of like, angry or sort of like, macho or malevolent forces in the for-profit world. And that's like, and that's been one of the nice things. And maybe, who knows, maybe I'm going to like get like my ass kicked soon. I probably will. And like, I'll be like, God, I wish I was still in the nonprofit sector or whatever. But there's something about like just sort of going out and being part of this sort of, market economy in a really, really straightforward way, that's freeing and doesn't feel like it feels like the way it should be and not scary. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, no, it makes perfect sense. I mean, I think that it gives you, I work with a number of nonprofits like Donors Choose in New York, which is run really leanly, actually, very much like a for-profit in that way. But the for-profit word gives you some metrics that are very clear to play with, that I think can be freeing in a way, because there's very little ambiguity about it.
No, that metric thing was huge for me. Yeah, that we didn't have, like, it was like sort of decisions. You make decisions then you end up making decisions for all sorts of other weird sort of arbitrary reasons, which like, does the director like it, or do our donors like it, or, rather not like, do people like it? This is something that should exist in the world, that people value enough to pay for. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. If now on that point, you've kind of, not switch teams. It's not like they're opposing teams, but you've done a lot since you were first teaching 8th grade science, obviously. What would the old you say to the new you? Or what would the old you think of the new you?
The old me would think of the new me. I think it depends on which stage you go to, but like, going back to like, sort of the college and post-college, like the old me would probably think the new me was some kind of sellout, maybe. I was never that like, sort of like that strident ever. But I was definitely more strident than I am now. And I definitely would have, and I was definitely sort of a little bit more suspicious of the profit motive when I was younger. So I would probably be like, what have you done with your life? I mean, the old me would also be like, you're an old man and all you do is like go and you have like these two kids that are just, I would have looked at myself with horror, I'm sure. Like my life. I haven't seen a movie in God knows how long. I don't travel anymore. So.
All right. One more question for you. So if you could give your 20-year-old self one piece of advice, what would it be?
This is going to sound corny, but don't be so afraid. I think I organized a lot of my choices based on sort of what I thought I could do rather than what I wanted to do. And I did that because I didn't want to try to do the things that I wanted to do, because I was afraid I would fail at them. So I think I organized a lot of my life around fear for this first, that first decade after college. And I would tell myself, don't be afraid to, go out and just like fall on your face a little bit more. It's all right.
That's good advice. So Alex, just in closing, I know you have to run. Where can people find more about you, about what you're up to?
Well, you can listen to the Startup podcast. It's all right there. And that's at our website, gimletmedia.com. Both our shows are there, Startup and Reply All. And all sorts of stuff about our company and about me.
Wonderful. All right, Alex, I will let you get going. I really enjoyed the masterclass. I will put tons of links in the show notes for everybody, including links to the shows, to Gimlet Media, to the gear that you use in the field, to Creative Live Class, and much more. So thanks so much for the time. And don't forget, this is a 2-part episode with Alex, and we're going to give you a sample of that next part, The Art of the Interview, which is a class of his. It is fantastic, so we'll give you a few minutes of that, and please continue listening. But first, just a short word from our sponsors. The Tim Ferriss Show is brought to you by Onnit. I have used Onnit products for years. If you look in my kitchen, in my garage, you will find Alpha Brain, chewable melatonin for resetting my clock when I'm traveling, kettlebells, battle ropes, maces, steel clubs. It sounds like a torture chamber, and it kind of is. It's a torture chamber for self-improvement. And you can see all of my favorite gear at onnit.com/Tim. That's ONNIT.com/Tim. And you can also get a discount on any supplements, food products. I like Hemp Force. I like Alpha Brain. Check it all out. onnit.com/Tim. The Tim Ferriss Show is also brought to you by 99 Designs. 99 Designs is your one-stop shop for anything graphic design related. You need a logo, you need a website, you need a business card, or anything else. You get an original design from designers around the world who submit drafts for you to review. You are happy or you get your money back. And I have used 99 Designs for book cover ideas for the 4-Hour Body, which went to #1 New York Times, for banner ads, and you can check out some of my actual competitions at 99designs.com/Tim. You can also get a free $99 upgrade if you want to give it a shot. That's 99designs.com/Tim. And now, back to the show.
So this is a story that was on This American Life a while ago. And the setup is that it's this actor, Tate Donovan. And Tate Donovan was a sort of a character actor. He'd been, sort of on a couple of different shows, but he didn't get recognized very much. And then he had a stint on Friends. And all of a sudden he was starting to get recognized. And it was really exciting for him to be recognized because he finally got to be the celebrity that he always wished that he could be, the celebrity that he would have wanted to meet before he was famous. So when he got recognized, and this story happens when one night he was out at this Broadway show, and a lot of people were coming up to him and being like, "Hey, I saw you," and he was able to talk to people and be very magnanimous and say, "Thank you so much, it really means a lot," and he was posing for pictures for people, and it was at the show, it was happening over and over and over again.
I was exactly how I wanted to be. I was doing it. I was doing great. And then the kid with the camera came along. This nervous kid, he must have been 16 years old. He's in a rented tuxedo, unbelievably shy and awkward, and he's got acne, and he's got a camera in his hand, and underneath the marquee is his date, who is literally like a prom dress, and she's got a corsage, and she's really, nervous and sort of clutching her hands, and he sort of comes up to me and he sort of mumbles, something like, something about a picture. And I'm like, I just feel for him. So I'm like, oh, absolutely. My gosh, sure. I have no problem. My God, you poor thing. And I go up to his girlfriend. I wrap my arms around her and I'm like, hey, where are you from? Fantastic. Going to see the play. That's great. And the guy is sort of not taking the photograph very quickly. He's just sort of staring at me and he's got his camera in his hands and it's down by his chin, and she's very stiff and awkward and I don't know what to do, so I just lean across and I kiss her on the cheek. And I'm like, all right, come on, take the picture, hurry up.
Do you guys want to find out what happens next? That's a story. When you want to, that is the power of a good narrative. So when I'm talking about those two basic things you're going for, emotion and narrative. We as humans are hardwired, I believe, to listen to narrative. And it's a very simple, sort of the mechanics of narrative are very simple. There's a sequence of actions, and there's sort of rising action, and it's culminating in something. And you were in the middle of that sequence of actions, and you were about to get to the culmination, and I stopped it. And it's frustrating. And you really want to know what happens next. And you would never, if you were listening to this, have turned off that podcast or that radio story at that moment. And that is a good story. And that's why you want to operate in stories. That's why when you're interviewing people, you want to get their stories out of them. And you want to get them talking in stories. Because stories are what we want to hear.
If you enjoyed this episode, you are going to love what I have coming. All sorts of crazy experiments, incredible guests, and you can very easily not miss any of it. Just subscribe on iTunes, or you can check out all of my guests, as well as my blog that has 1 to 2 million readers per month at 4hourworkweek.com. All spelled out, 4hourworkweek.com. That's where I chronicle all of my insane self-experimentation, and I would love to hear from you. So please reach out to me on Twitter, twitter.com/tferriss, TFERRISS, or on Facebook at facebook.com/Tim Ferriss with 2 R's and 2 S's, of course. And until next time, thank you so much for listening.